Story by Premchand. Cricket match. January 1, 1935. Today, I am unable to express the disappointment I felt during the cricket match. Our team was far stronger than the opponents, yet we lost, and they celebrated their victory while taking away the trophy. Why? Simply because we do not prioritize merit for leadership. Instead, we consider wealth and status as essential for leadership. His Highness was chosen as the captain, and the decision of the cricket board had to be accepted. But how many hearts were burning with anger? How many people accepted the decision thinking it was a command from authority? Where was the enthusiasm? Where was the resolve? Where was the passion to give up the last drop of blood? We played, and of course, we played wholeheartedly. But this was not the army of those who would die for truth. No one had the heart in the game. I was standing at the station, worried about getting a third-class ticket, when a young lady, who had just alighted from a car, came forward, shook my hand, and said, "You are traveling on the same train, Mr. Zafar?" I was astonished. Who is this girl, and how does she know my name? For a moment, I was taken aback, as if all the manners and etiquette I had known had disappeared from my mind. There was a certain grace in her beauty that made even the greatest of men bow down. I had met Nizam of Hyderabad, His Excellency the Viceroy, and the Maharaja of Mysore, shaken their hands, sat with them for meals, but I had never felt this kind of weakness. Here, I felt as though I wanted to kiss her feet with my eyelids. This was not the elegance we traditionally revere, nor the delicacy that poets swear by. There was intelligence, seriousness, dignity, enthusiasm, and a fearless desire for self-expression in her presence. I asked, somewhat surprised, "Yes. But how do you know me?" Her informal tone suggested that she knew me well. I felt like an outsider, though I tried not to show it. In this moment, I also played my role as a man and asked, "Anything I can do for you?" She smiled and said, "Yes, I will need quite a few things from you. Let's go inside and sit in the waiting room. You must be going to Lucknow, too? I am going there as well." Once inside the waiting room, she made me sit on a comfortable chair and herself took a modest seat. As she offered me a cigarette case, she said, "Your bowling was really impressive today. Otherwise, we would have lost the entire inning." This only added to my surprise. This beauty had an interest in cricket. I felt uneasy sitting in that comfortable chair in front of her. This was a rudeness I had never indulged in before. My attention was distracted, and I felt a bit suffocated. The energy and the youthful excitement that should have naturally taken over me in such a situation were missing. I asked, "Were you sitting there in the stands?" "Yes, from the beginning to the end," she replied, lighting a cigarette. "I was really impressed by your game. Others seemed a bit indifferent, but I understood the reason. In our country, we have no capacity to put the right people in the right positions. It's like this political degeneration has crushed all our virtues. The person who has money is entitled to everything. Whether or not they have the ability, they can become the president of a conference on knowledge, science, literature, or social issues. They inaugurate new buildings, lay the foundations, lead cultural movements, deliver convocation speeches, and distribute awards to students. This is the gift of our slave mentality. It is no wonder that we are so degraded and fallen. Where there is power and authority, one might have no choice but to bow down. But where we can act independently with our own thoughts and actions, a habit of sycophancy still doesn't let us go. The captain of this team should have been you. If you were in charge, we would have seen who would have won." Those were the very thoughts in my mind, but coming from her, they became so effective and eye-opening. I replied, "You are right. This is indeed our weakness. You should not have been part of this team," she said. "I was compelled," I replied. Her name was Miss Helen Mukherjee. She had just arrived from England, and had come to Bombay specifically to watch the cricket match. She had studied medicine in England, and serving the people was her life's mission. She had seen my picture in a newspaper there and read about me, which is why she had a favorable opinion of me. After watching me play, she became even more impressed. She had a plan to form a new cricket team for India, made up only of those who truly deserve to represent the nation. She proposed that I should become the captain of this team. She intended to travel around India for this purpose. Her late father, Dr. N. Mukherjee, had left behind a substantial fortune, and she was the sole heir to it. When I heard her proposal, my head seemed to spin, as if my entire life's dream might suddenly come true in such an unexpected way. I don't believe in supernatural power, but at that moment, every fiber of my being was filled with gratitude and devotion. I thanked Miss Helen in appropriate and humble words. The train bell rang, and Miss Mukherjee ordered 2 first-class tickets. I couldn't protest. She had my luggage taken, and even picked up my hat herself. Without hesitation, she entered a compartment and invited me to join her. Her servant sat in the 3rd class. I felt as though I had lost my willpower. God knows why I allowed her to take the lead in all matters, which, as a man, I should have had the right to decide. Perhaps her beauty, intellectual dignity, and generosity had such an influence on me that I felt like I was under a spell, as if she were a sorceress from Kamrup, and my own willpower had vanished. In that brief moment, my existence seemed to fade into her will. My pride should have made me refuse her request to get a first-class ticket for me and instead, get third-class tickets for both of us. But I had lost my agency completely. Janwari though. I am amazed at why Helen feels such sympathy for me, and it's not just friendly sympathy, there is a truth of love in it. There's no hospitality like this in Mere Pity. And as for the acceptance of my qualities, I am not so naive as to be deceived by that. Acceptance of qualities might at best result in a cigarette and a cup of tea. Such hospitality I can find whenever I am invited to play a match. Even there, though, I am not treated with this heartfelt attention, it's merely formal courtesy. But with her, it seems as though she has devoted herself entirely to my comfort and well-being. I doubt I could behave this intimately with anyone except my lover. And remember, I said lover, not wife. We do not show this kind of hospitality to our wives, rather, we have grown accustomed to receiving hospitality from them, and perhaps this is the true nature of it. But for now, I am not familiar with either of these 2 forms of blessings. I was already part of her breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and at every station, she was traveling by a special postal train, stopping only at key stations. She would buy fruits and nuts and insist on feeding me. She knows well what is famous at each place. She bought a variety of gifts for my friends and family, but what amazes me is that I never once refused her. How could I refuse? She never asked me before bringing something. When she brings me a gift with love, how can I refuse it? God knows why, even though I am a man, I become shy and quiet in front of her, as if I have no words left in me. After a tiring day, I suffered a restless night with a slight headache, but I exaggerated the pain. If I had been alone, I might not have cared about the pain at all, but today, with her presence, I seemed to enjoy making the pain known. She began massaging my head with oil, and I found myself growing increasingly weak under her touch. With my unease, her worry seemed to increase as well. She kept asking me repeatedly, "How is the pain now?" And I would reluctantly say, "Better." The touch of her delicate palms made a tingling sensation run through my body. Her beautiful face was bent over mine, and her warm breath kissed my forehead. I felt as if I were experiencing heaven itself. Now, in my heart, there was a rising desire to win her affection. I wanted her to make the first move. I couldn't let her sense that I had already fallen for her. In less than 24 hours, how my mental state had shifted, how I had gone from being a supplicant of love to feeling deserving of it. She continued to sit there, with her hand on my head, attending to me with the same intensity. I suddenly felt a wave of pity for her, and I wasn't free from it either, but the pleasure I found in this affection was overwhelming. To love is slavery, to be loved is royalty. I said, showing my concern, "You must have gone through a lot because of me." She responded with warmth, "What trouble did I have? You were in pain, and I was sitting here. I wish I could take this pain upon myself. I was soaring in the 7th heaven. Janwari 5. Yesterday evening we reached Lucknow. On the way, Helen and I had an extensive conversation about cultural, political, and literary matters. By God's grace, I am also a graduate, and ever since, I have been reading books in my spare time and sitting with learned people. But in comparison to her vast knowledge, at every step, I feel a sense of my own inferiority. She has her own opinion on every issue, and it seems that she has formed it after thorough investigation. On the other hand, I am one of those people who float with the wind, whose momentary inspirations can turn everything upside down. I tried to somehow assert my intellect, but her perspectives left me speechless. When I realized that I couldn't win against her in discussions of knowledge and science, I brought up the topic of the battle between Abyssinia and Italy, something I had read about and, in my opinion, understood a great deal. I passionately spoke about how England and France had pressured Italy. She smiled and said, "You think that England and France are acting out of a sense of humanity and the desire to help the weak? Then you're mistaken. Their imperialistic ambitions cannot tolerate the flourishing of any other power. Mussolini is doing exactly what England has done many times before and still does today. This whole masquerade is just for gaining commercial advantages in Abyssinia. England needs markets for its trade, land for its expanding population, and positions of authority for its educated class, so why shouldn't Italy want the same? Italy, at least, openly declares what it is doing. It has never boasted of fraternity with the world's people, nor sung the tune of peace. It clearly states that struggle is the essence of life. Human progress comes through war. It is on the battlefield that man's true qualities are revealed. The idea of equality for all is madness to them. They consider themselves part of the great nations that have the right to rule over colored populations. Hence, we can understand their methods. England has always worked through deceit, dividing the elements within a nation or exploiting their internal contradictions to make them its puppets. I would rather see Italy, Japan, and Germany prosper and break England's dominance. Only then will there be real democracy and peace in the world. Until the current civilization is destroyed, there will be no peace. The weaker nations have no right to survive, just as weak plants don't. Not because their existence is a burden to them, but because they are responsible for the strife and bloodshed in this world. I don't know why I started agreeing with her. I did respond, and I forcefully disagreed with these views. But I saw that she was not interested in adopting a balanced approach in this matter, or perhaps she couldn't. As soon as we got off at the station, I became anxious about how to host Helen. If I took her to a hotel, who knows what she might think in her heart. If I brought her to my house, I would feel embarrassed. What would she find in a house like mine, in such a cramped, dark, and broken down alley, with the same old atmosphere? My mother might not even allow her to step into the house. And even if it came to that, Helen would likely run away at the doorstep. I wish I had my own house, well decorated and presentable, where I could host Helen properly. What greater happiness could there be than this? But alas, poverty had to ruin everything. As I was lost in these thoughts, Helen arranged for a porter to pick up the luggage and called a taxi. What choice did I have but to get into the taxi with her? I am sure if I had taken her to my home, despite its inadequacies, she would have been happy. Helen is refined but not a snob. She is always ready for experimentation and experiences. Perhaps Helen even invites challenges and unpleasant experiences, but I neither have the imagination nor the courage for that. If she had looked closely at my face, she would have known how much embarrassment and helplessness was showing. But protocol had to be observed. I protested, "I wanted to make you my guest, but you're taking me to a hotel instead." With a playful smile, she said, "That's exactly why, so you don't get out of control." What greater pleasure could I have than to enjoy your hospitality? But love is jealous, you know that. There, your dear friends would take up most of your time, and you wouldn't even have time to talk to me. And I've had enough experience with men to know how often they are inconsiderate and quick to forget. I can't leave you for even a moment. As long as I'm in front of you, you won't be able to forget me. I was not just surprised at my good fortune, but it felt as if I were dreaming. The beautiful woman, for whose glance I would sacrifice myself, was professing her love for me in this way. I felt like grabbing her feet right then, holding her to my chest, and soaking her with my tears. We reached the hotel. My room was separate. We had dinner together and then walked for a while on the lush green grass. The question was how to select players. I wanted to walk with her all night, but she said, "You should rest now. There is much to do tomorrow." I went to my room and lay down, but I couldn't sleep the whole night. Helen's mind remained hidden from me, and every moment she seemed like a puzzle I was trying to solve. January 12. Today, there was a gathering of cricketers in Lucknow all day. Helen was like a lamp, and the moths were circling around her. Among them, apart from me, two players caught Helen's attention, Brajendra and Sadak. She wanted to include them in the All India team. There's no doubt that both are masters of the game, but the way they've started out, it seems they're not here to play cricket, but to try their luck. Helen's temperament is difficult to understand. Brajendra is better looking than me, I admit, and he carries himself like a gentleman. But he's a complete flirt and a loafer. I don't want Helen to have anything to do with him. He has no sense of decorum. He speaks crudely, makes vulgar jokes, has no sense of timing or occasion, and sometimes makes advances towards Helen that make me feel embarrassed. But Helen, perhaps, doesn't notice his crudeness or his cheap gestures. In fact, she seems to enjoy them. I've never seen a frown on her face. I'm not saying that being cheerful is a bad thing, nor do I oppose liveliness, but with a lady, one should always maintain respect and decorum. Sadak, on the other hand, comes from an esteemed family. With very pure conduct, he's almost cold-natured, somewhat arrogant, and looks irritable. But now he has entered the ranks of the martyrs, those who sacrifice their lives for something greater. Yesterday, he kept reciting his poetry to Helen, and she seemed quite pleased with it. I didn't find anything special in those poems. I had never seen him recite poetry before, so where did this sudden enthusiasm for it come from? There's magic in his appearance, no doubt, but he couldn't even think of reciting any verses by Hasrat, Jigar, or Josh to impress Helen. Helen doesn't read his poetry, so what's the point of reciting it? But if I say something about this, it will upset him. He'll think I'm jealous. Why would I be jealous? Am I the only one who admires Helen? Yes, I do want her to be able to distinguish between the good and bad, but I don't like anyone being overly familiar with her. However, in Helen's eyes, everyone is equal. She can detach herself from everyone and still love them all equally. It's hard to tell who she's more inclined towards, Sadak or someone else. She doesn't seem to be at all affected by Sadak's wealth. Yesterday evening, we went to the cinema. Sadak showed an extraordinary act of generosity. He took out some money from his pocket and went to buy tickets for everyone. Mr. Sadak, who is usually quite tight-fisted, was moved to generosity by Helen. But Helen stopped him and went in herself to buy tickets for everyone. She's so free with her money that Sadak, despite his wealth, is astonished. When his hand reaches for his pocket, Helen's money is already at the counter. I have complete admiration for Helen's understanding of human nature. It seems like she is always waiting for our requests, and she takes special pleasure in fulfilling them. She gifted Sadak an album of rare European paintings, reproductions of works she had personally collected from galleries all over Europe. Her eye for beauty is so refined. When Brajendra showed up in a new suit that he had just gotten made, Helen smiled and said, "Be careful, you might get an evil eye. Today, you are looking like another Yusuf." Brajendra was thrilled. When I recited my latest ghazal with rhythm and tone, Helen jumped with joy at each line. She's an incredible connoisseur of poetry. I've never felt so pleased with my work, but when everyone's praising you, it somehow doesn't feel as valuable. Sadak has never claimed to be good looking. As rich as he might be in inner beauty, he's poor in outward appearance. But today, when his eyes glistened after a drink, Helen, with a loving tone, said, "Your eyes are piercing through my heart." And at that moment, Sadak almost fell at her feet, held back only by his shame. I'm sure no one has ever praised his eyes in such a way. I've never received any compliments about my appearance, never heard that I'm beautiful. I know Helen's kindness doesn't have any deeper meaning, but now, I too started feeling uneasy, wondering why she's showing such kindness to me. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but I became restless. When I was coming back from the university ground after cricket practice in the evening, my hair was even more disheveled than usual. Helen, looking at me with affectionate eyes, immediately said, "I feel like sacrificing myself for these messy locks of yours." I was overjoyed. I can't even describe the storm of emotions that arose in my heart. But, for some reason, none of us Brijendra, Sadik, or I could bring ourselves to compliment her appearance or mannerisms. We felt we didn't have the right words. Whatever we might say, it felt inadequate. We couldn't bring ourselves to speak because we were too deeply affected. February 8. We've reached Delhi. In the meantime, we visited places like Moradabad, Nainital, and Dehradun, but didn't find any promising players. We're hoping to meet some good ones in Aligarh and Delhi, so we plan to stay there for a few more days. Once the 11 is finalized, we will head to Bombay for a month of practice. In March, the Australian team will depart from here. By then, they will have played all their scheduled matches in India, and we will play the final match with them. If God wills, we'll avenge all of India's defeats and turn the tide. Sadak and Brajendra travelled with us. I didn't want them to come, but perhaps Helen enjoys the company of admirers, as we are all staying in the same hotel and everyone is her guest. When we arrived at the station, hundreds of people were there to welcome us. There were even several women, but for some reason, Helen seems to have an aversion to women. She avoids their company, especially the company of beautiful women, though she has no reason to be jealous of them. Even though beauty doesn't solely define her, she possesses such attractive qualities that no fairy could stand in comparison. Beauty isn't just in one's appearance, there's beauty in one's interests, conversation, and grace as well. Whether she truly loves anyone or not, only God knows, but when it comes to expressing love, she is unmatched. In the art of making others feel cherished and pampered, even people like us, who are otherwise quite gallant, feel humbled in her presence. In the evening, we went on a tour of New Delhi. It's a charming place, wide roads, beautiful stretches of land, and delightful little details. The government has spent enormous amounts of money on its development, and it seems unnecessary. This money could have been better spent on public welfare, but what can you do when the common people are as enamored with grandeur and wealth as they are with any social welfare program? If you had built a few more schools or spent the money on improving roads or agricultural research, the people would have been far more affected. But the common folk remain fascinated by splendor, luxury, and wealth. The vision of kingship, which is embedded in their hearts, will last for centuries to come. The king's luxury is essential, the lavish spending of money is crucial. A king who is thrifty or miserly, no matter how much he spends on the welfare of his people, cannot be as popular. The British are masters of psychology. Not just the British, any ruler who has earned his position through might and intellect is, by default, a master of psychology. Without it, how could he hold sway over the masses? Anyway, this is just my opinion. I have a feeling that perhaps our team will remain just a dream. Already, tensions are rising among us. Brajendra is opposing me at every step. If I say, common, he immediately retorts with, tamarind. And Helen seems to like him. I had begun dreaming of how sweet life could be, but now Brajendra, that ungrateful, selfish Brajendra, is ruining it all. It's clear only one of us can remain Helen's favorite. One of us will have to step aside. February 7. Thankfully, our efforts in Delhi have been successful. Our team has now been completed with 3 new players, Jafar, Mehra, and Arjun Singh. After seeing their skills today, the dominance of Australian cricketers has faded in my heart. All 3 bowlers are exceptional. Jafar bowls with precision, Mehra is a test of patience, and Arjun is very clever. They all have strong characters and are true to their principles. If anyone were to ask for an honest opinion, I would say that Arjun plays better than me. He's been to England twice, knows their way of living, and understands their temperament. He's the epitome of civility and manners. Brajendra's appeal has faded. Now, it's Arjun who has Helen's special favor, and it's not going to be easy for me to compete with him. I fear he may become an obstacle in my path. February 25. Our team is now complete. We got 2 players from Aligarh, 3 from Lahore, and 1 from Ajmer, and we arrived in Bombay yesterday. We've played matches in Ajmer, Lahore, and Delhi against their teams and have won with great ease. Today, we're up against the Hindu team from Bombay, and I'm confident that the field will be ours. Arjun is the best player on our team, and Helen gives him a lot of attention. But I don't feel jealous. Such attention is only natural for a guest. What's there to fear from a guest? The interesting thing is that everyone believes Helen is someone deserving of their favors, and they all try to win her affection in some way. If anyone has a headache, it's her duty to inquire about their health and apply sandalwood to their head. Yet, despite all this, her power over everyone is such that no one dares to criticize her. Everyone is her servant. She pampers them, but at the same time, she rules over them. There's a gathering of beautiful women under the tent, yet none of her captives dare to even glance at any of them. Every heart is in awe of her, as if she is always present, watching. Arjun, who had casually glanced at a woman, was met with such a piercing look from Helen that his face turned pale. Everyone believes that she holds the power of their destiny, and offending her might mean the end of their life. What can I say about others? I feel like I've sold myself into her hands. It feels as if something within me has disappeared, something that once fueled the fire of jealousy in my heart. When Helen speaks to or shows affection for anyone else, I don't get angry anymore. Yes, it still hurts, but the urge to shed tears alone is all I want to do. Where has my self-respect gone? I can't say. Just when I thought my heart was shattered by her displeasure, a fleeting glance or a slight smile from her reignites something inside me. I don't know what power she possesses that allows her to rule over the hearts of so many brave young men. Should I call it courage, or is it her cleverness and quick wit? We are all like puppets in her hands. We have no identity or existence of our own. Through her beauty, intelligence, wealth, and, most importantly, her ability to unite everyone under her influence, she has gained control over our hearts. March 8. Yesterday, our match against the Australian team ended. There was a crowd of no less than 50,000 spectators. We defeated them comprehensively, and we were revered like gods. Every one of us worked with dedication, and we all shared in the glory. As soon as the match ended, the city hosted a grand party for us. Such a party might not even be thrown in honor of the Viceroy. I was overwhelmed with praise and congratulations. I had taken 5 wickets for just 44 runs. I was astonished by the ferocity of my bowling. Surely, some supernatural force was helping us. Amidst this crowd, the beauty of Bombay shone in all its grandeur and vibrancy, and I can claim that no other city in the world is as fortunate when it comes to beauty. But even in this crowd, Helen remained the center of attention. She was not just beautiful, she also spoke sweetly, and her gestures were equally charming. Every young man was entranced by her, and just as she played with our emotions, she was playing with theirs too. I had never seen a more handsome young man than the Maharaja's son. His presence exuded authority. His love must have caused many beautiful women sorrow, I imagine. His masculine allure spread like magic. Helen met him with the same carefree familiarity as she did with the thousands of young men around her. His beauty, his wealth, had no effect on her. Where did all this pride and self-respect come from? She never wavered, never succumbed to anyone, never showed any favoritism. It was always the same carefree humor, the same display of affection, no special attachment to anyone, but an equal charm for everyone, all with the same sense of aloof grace. We returned to the hotel after a sightseeing tour around 10 p.m., and everyone was dreaming new dreams. There was a nervous excitement in all our hearts, as if something memorable was about to happen. Everyone was filled with a mix of hope and fear, thinking that tonight would be a momentous event in their lives. No one knew what the plan was. Everyone was dreaming, and each of us felt that Helen's gaze was upon us, but there was also a fear in our hearts. What if Helen betrayed us? We would be ready to sacrifice our lives for her. Going home alive after this would be impossible. At that moment, Helen called me to her room. When I went, I found all the players gathered there. Helen, dressed in a shimmering, silky sari, was dazzling with her beauty. I felt irritated. Why call me for a routine meeting with the others? I thought I deserved special treatment. I had forgotten that perhaps each one of them considered themselves worthy of such special treatment. Helen sat down on a chair and said, "Friends, I can't express how grateful I am. You fulfilled a great desire of mine. Does anyone remember Mr. Ratan Lal? Ratan Lal, how could anyone forget him? He was the man who first gave the Indian cricket team the opportunity to showcase their talent on English soil, who invested millions of rupees for it, and finally, after repeated defeats, ended his life in England in despair. His image still lingers in our minds. Everyone nodded, remembering him. Today, on this great achievement, I congratulate you all. God willing, next year we will tour England. You must start preparing for that now. The real pleasure will be when we don't lose a single match there and keep the field under our control. Friends, that is my life's goal. The work done to achieve a goal is what life is about. We only succeed when we are fully dedicated to the work and make that goal our dream, our love, the center of our lives. There should be no desire, no wish standing between us and this goal. Forgive me, but you have not learned to live for your goals. For you, cricket is just entertainment, and you don't truly love it. Many of our friends live like this, with their hearts and minds in different places, and they fail in life. For you, I was more important. Cricket was merely a means to make me happy. Still, you succeeded. There are thousands of young men in this country who, if they learn to live and die for the fulfillment of a goal, will create miracles. Go ahead and achieve that greatness. My beauty and my nights are not for being a plaything of lust. I find it disgraceful to live merely to please the eyes of young men and stir their hearts with frivolity. True life is one where we live not for ourselves, but for others. We all listened with our heads lowered and felt frustrated. Helen left the room and got into her car. She had already made arrangements for her departure. Before we could regain our senses or comprehend the situation, she was gone. For the next week, we roamed the streets, hotels, and bungalows of Bombay, searching for her, but she was nowhere to be found. The worst part was that the ideal she had set for our lives was beyond our reach. With her departure, all the zest and excitement in our lives seemed to vanish. The story ends here. How did you like it? Please comment, like, or dislike. Share with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you.